Hello there. It would appear that I am live. I hope everyone's having a good day. It's been a wonderful weekend, hasn't it? The sun's been nice. Here in Manchester, it's been a little bit cloudy, but it's been warm and comfortable. So I just thought I'd start a live stream. Just reasons. That's it. So for me, my favourite show of the year is coming up, and that's the DMU Showcase show. That's held on at Burton-on-Trent, and it's a fully D&E show, so no steam trains, I'm afraid. The society, I've been a member of this society for many years, for about at least 10 years now, and I've learned an awful lot. Effectively, when I joined DMU, I did a little bit of super detailing and repaints and numbering, that kind of thing. But when I joined, I learned that there are a lot more details in things that I'd never realised. For example, Class 37s, the cantrail grills at the top. There are wide cantrail grills, and then there are ones with extra slats in, which represent the ones that were done by RSH at Stockton. So little things like that. Another example is Class 20s. Did you know that there are two versions of the windows? I never knew that until I, saw a thread on the DMU forum, and it's like, I don't know, all these years I'd been looking, and I used to think there were only two differences between Class 20s, ones which had the disc head codes and the other ones with the box head code. But I'll show you another example. Let me just get a screen share ready. So, wrong picture. So, as I mentioned, Class 20s, so there's two different window sizes. So you've got ones like this, which have a deep window here, and you can see how it's lower than the window there. And then we've got a shorter version. Now, also we have the box head code version there as well. There you go. So there's the small one. You can see how there's a sort of crease on the body side there. So where it goes up, comes in slightly, and the window frame is shorter, and it lines up with the window. And apparently, from what I understand, the larger window version, here's the larger window version, is because I believe it was a Scottish conversion, because up in Scotland they had tokens a lot of the time, and the drivers needed to lean out the window to hand the token to a signalman, and vice versa. So and some had tablet catchers as well. So it was just an easy way of being able to give greater access. So little things like that. But another difference is on the bogies. This bottom bar here, there are three versions, and I'd never noticed it before. You've got this one here, which is it's like an I-beam style one. We have, let's keep scrolling till I find one. There we go. So we've got a solid bar there, which is much stronger and thicker. And then there's another example of the bar. And then there are other ones which have, there we go, holes in them. They've got holes in, presumably to reduce the weight. Now, Bachmann have been really cool that they've made a model with each version. And also, sometimes you'll find that different bogies have different types where they've been swapped here and there. I wonder if we'll see one here somewhere. It's not very common, but it does happen. One has been changed, but the other one hasn't. probably end up searching all day. Yeah, it's not really important. But as I said, that's a simple example of the kind of things that I've learned over my time. And it's just given me a greater focus on details, and frequently the details that many people miss. And as I said, I missed for an awful long time. So I'm going to tell you about the DMU show. So the DMU show is held at Burton-on-Trent. So this is sort of halfway between Derby and Birmingham. So it's fairly easy access. Let me show you. So here on the map. So we've got Birmingham, we've got Derby, and we've got Burton-on-Trent that's right in the middle. And the great thing is that it's really close to the town centre. So here's the train station, and you leave the train station, you follow the road down the hill, and here's the town hall. And this is where we have the show. So it's a 5-minute walk. And there's a cash machine over here, I think it is. So piece of cake to get there. And I'm going to share with you the website for, was it that one? Yes. So this is the DMU website, and this is the page. So it is only 2 weeks away now, not next weekend, but the weekend after, the 2nd of June and the 3rd of June. You see 10 till 5 and 10 till 4 on the Sunday. Burton-on-Trent, just down the road. £9 to get in. DMU members get a discount, and there's a families one as well. And we've got a list of the layouts here. Some you may have heard of. So Deadman's Lane. This is Mick Bryant. If you watch, if you look at RM Web, you may have seen his stuff. He does a lot of Network Southeast. Network Rail things. And so, and he's got a great attention to detail, which again I very much appreciate. So, and this is based upon Derby RTC. An Engage layout has had to pull out, but Longcast West has gone, which is a very good P4 layout, which is out there as well. So, got some nice looking layouts there, and we also have a good range of traders as well. And there are a couple of some demos as well. They tend to be in the small room down the hall. There's a second-hand trade stall as well, which is always good. Always quite hectic to get in. So Richard Dockerell, he does some exceptional modeling. I've known him for years. He did some Engage stuff, that just if I showed you photos of his work, you would think they were double O gauge. They're that well detailed. And he does similar kind of work with 7mm now, so O gauge. And one of the wonderful things that's changed in the last, decades or so with O gauge is that when I first started the hobby more than 25 years ago, N-gauge was so small that you couldn't really get much detail into it. O-gauge, you had to put loads of extra work into it to make it look real. Otherwise, it looked like a big plastic toy. And double O-gauge or 4mm was just the right scale. You could do enough to put extra detail on to make it look really nice. So it had that nice balance to it. But O-gauge has come on exceptionally in the last decade or so, largely thanks to Heljan and El Dapol as well, creating all sorts of new wagons and coaches and locomotives, obviously. Sadly, just like the real thing folded earlier this year, So that's been a bit of a loss, but I understand that someone may be taking over the range, but I'm not sure about that. So Mark Lambert, he has a bit of an obsession for brake vans, if I remember correctly, but he does some very excellent modeling again. Alan Monk, I've known him for many years. In fact, he was one of the reasons why I got into DMU in the first place. Him and Natalie were on the DMU stand at the Worley show, which I went to, and well, obviously I went to, and you know, they had some drawing stuff and the update magazine that we have for the society, and it was like, oh yeah, this is really going to be useful, and you know, it's been so good that I've stayed on, you know, for more than 10 years now. And then we got Phil Eames. If you've ever seen a layout called Calcutta Sidings, or Calcutta Sidings 2 now, he had a layout many years ago, and then he's revised it to P4 standards. So, you know, again, exceptional modeling. So, yes, excellent one. And then, of course, we've got some of the societies. We've got Dapple and Backman there, and Revolution Trains. So it's an excellent show. It really is. I can't tell you enough how good a show it is. So I hope you'll come along. It's, like I say, not too far away, not terribly expensive to go there. It's nice, slap bang in the middle of the country. So it's easy access. So I'm just looking at the side chat, my second monitor over there. So say hello, Brian and Graham and Tullia and Trivana and George Street, Effingham. So thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying this. Got 13 people watching right now. Thank you very much. So if you want to ask me a question, feel free to put it in the side chat. I appreciate the kind of thing that you know, you might be interested in. I've jokingly referred to myself as a vast suppository of information. I have photos on pretty much everything. So if you need something explaining, or you know, I usually have the answer. And I'm not infallible. You know, we don't know everything. So, but what I want to do is try and impart some of the information that I have so that fellow modelers can pick up on it. So, you know, because I think we all want to run our model railways in the most prototypical way possible. You know, sort of not so much toy trains as model railways. So, yes. So let's have a think. Okay. I left oh, sorry, there is one thing I forgot to mention. In the description on the video, I've left the join link. So you can click on it and join me, and we can talk one-on-one or multiple on one. So you can join me in this stream. It won't just be me talking to the camera. It will be us talking like we're in the same room. So the link is down below. Something to bear in mind, some browsers don't really like it. So Google Chrome seems to work. Since this format is Google Hangouts, Google Chrome works. I don't know why it doesn't work on Firefox. That's my browser of choice. But unfortunately, this happens sometimes. So, yeah. So what the last time I did one of these live streams, I showed my model list and I talked about some of the things that, you know, the justifications for the things that I'm modeling. So I think I might do that. That'll be, you know, I think that might be entertaining. So my model list is pretty extensive, and it's not like I will do all these things. These are things that I would like to do. The ones that are in black are ones that I've not got. The ones that are in blue are things that I do have, And things that are pink are things that are either coming out or I need to fill in the hole. So, for example, these ones here, 20030 and 64, the green with red soul bar specials from Tinsley. I've got one of them, but I need the other one to go with it. And because of body styles and, so on, I haven't got the appropriate one at the moment. So I need a disk head code, large window version, for example. So, and I'll show you an example of, so I keep, because I've got a model list, I keep everything in sections. So this is an example. Now I'm doing them when they were at the end of their lives. This picture here is a part of the 3 to the C show. Or they did a rail tour, 3 to the C. So it was 3 Class 20s, and they went to I think it was somewhere like Brighton or Clacton or something. Can't remember now. But I'm doing them at the end of their lives when they were looking decidedly ropey, like this. So, the roof is filthy, the body side is filthy. I mean, it's supposed to be green, but I think it's more brown. And the paint is patchy and grubby, as it scrapped. So there we go. Something that looks like that. This is the pair of them. So you can see how mucky the roof is there, and there probably is still a year left on them. So, yeah, they look awful. But doesn't that make them look great? Now, I forgot who it was now. It might have been Reels of Sheffield or someone like that. They did a limited edition pair. They go for a lot of money. I wasn't going to pay that kind of money because I'm going to make them look awful. So I don't see much point in, spending a lot of money on something that looks pristine if I'm going to turn it into this. So, just horrible and ugly. But that's what makes them interesting. So that's an example there. And like I say, there are plenty of things that I have. Now, bear in mind that although I've got them marked on my model list, doesn't mean to say that they've been modeled properly yet. I've got the models, they're in boxes, in my bedroom. And gradually, my goal is to build them up over time. The Class 59s here, I have two Lima ones. One of which I've started to convert by taking Class 66 and using the guts out of it. And then Depol decided they were going to bring one out. So as a result, it's pending at the moment. Maybe I'll finish the job, maybe I won't. But, and these ones, blue ones, are ones that I've got with modern mechanisms. The light blue ones are ones that are old Ringfield motor type ones. And 90% of my locos, I've got 130, of which I think 20 of them are old style Ringfield motors. And the only ones that I have are ones that haven't been brought out as new models yet. Now, that's not entirely true, exactly. This one is it's a Hornby Class 86, which will have the Helgen Class 33 mechanism in it, and the bogie length is the same on the model. And these two here are Helgen ones, which the body is not very good, so I'll be using the old Hornbeam body on the Helgen chassis. And then all these ones here are Ringfield ones. And the reason why I've got them marked as the 6s for now is because generally the 6s work together. And so that'll make them strong enough, because Ringfield motors aren't very good compared to the old ones. But anyway, so, and these are ones that are coming out with Bachmann. So coaches, lots and lots of coaches. Again, pink ones are things that I would like to finish off certain things. Through lots of parcel coaches, few departmental vehicles, but so multiple units I'm going to talk about here. Let's have a look. Galton Parkway, yep, that sounds perfectly fine. The two that I have are Virgin liveried ones, but I can repaint if you wish, if you're prepared to pay for the work. These are units I would like, although I've tweaked my model list in recent years. When I first, I used to live in Devon before I moved up to Manchester, and Devon had an eclectic range of interesting units. They tried to replace them with 142s, but unfortunately, the long wheelbase of them and the tight Cornish curves, they wore out the wheels in no time, and apparently they lasted for 3 weeks before they had to replace the wheels. The screaming, squealing around the corners. The passengers hated them. They were expensive to look after and maintain, and like I say, they needed constant wheel replacements. So, and they would literally use them for a week and a half, and then turn the unit around so they had an even amount of wear. I used to have a number of Devon-based ones, but since I moved to Manchester, I've grown to like AC Electrics a lot, and there's a lot more diversity around and color schemes and so on in the northwest and northeast kind of area. So that's my focal range. Now, it would look weird to have Plymouth-based multiple units under overhead wires. That would just look silly. So what I've done is I've revised some. So this here now, let me just move that out of the way for a moment. Just find some. Get that very again sometimes. So just somewhere else. Apologies for the pause. I'll just find something to illustrate. There we go. Okay, I'll show that in a minute. So, so these ones at the top, I'd like a 122 in blue-grey, but these are provisional at the moment. That's the reason why they're darkened out. So a blue-grey 121 for a single car unit, that'll be if I'm modeling the Birmingham area. Because what I'm doing is, as having an eclectic taste, I want to model some bits in the sort of Crewe, Manchester, Preston, Liverpool kind of area. But I also want to model in the Leeds area with Mark IV trains and, HSTs and so on. So when I first build my layout, it'll be based upon the East Coast Main Line. And then gradually I will, and I'll just take models off and replace them. So, I'd be able to take one day or 1 week, I could run it as East Coast Main Line Mark IV trains and Class 91s, and then take those models off and stick Class 90 with Mark III coaches on, and other, make other changes. So things like that. So these two here are a recent tweak. Now, when I was in Devon, Lara Depot had, as I mentioned before, an eclectic taste of DMUs. So let's have a look. First gen 108. So when we look at Plymouth, you have there again. So when we look at Plymouth, we have the standard Class 108, or fairly standard. And of course, there's two versions. You've got the box head code there, and you've got the destination blind version. And you got, you know, the set number. Now, sometimes you get them like this, which is just a standard 108. But sometimes they just put two different types together. This is a 101 vehicle. So this is a 101, a 101, 108 set. 108, pair of 108s, pair of 108s. So there's, you know, that you can have an eclectic style again. There's another 101, 108 set. And then now it was on my model list at one point, but one set that I was going to do was P828, and is that it? Don't think so. No, it's 826. But a similar thing. If you notice, it's a 108, 108, 101 set. And the previous one I showed you was a 101, 108 set. So what I was going to do was P870 as a 101, 108 set, and the one in this case, in fact, this case it's got both. Let's find P828. Is that it? No. P828. There we go. Okay, so this is a former Buxton unit. You can tell by the black around the windows. And Beckman do a 3-car set. That's a 101 vehicle. It's not the best shot. That's P828 before it caught fire. One of the vehicles caught fire and it literally buckled. In fact, I just so happen right here, I just happen to have an old Rail magazine, and I got this at the time. So this is March 91. And in the news section, we have it caught fire and it literally buckled. So, and the West Coast, the West of England line was shut for 3 days because it was in a very difficult place to pick it up. Yeah, it caught fire after passing through Totnes. So when the vehicle was damaged, they used it to, they used a 101 vehicle they had, and they pushed it, you know, made them into a new unit. So I used to have these categorized because I was modeling them, but, you know, since I changed my modeling, so if we look at this one here, let's just take this one, for example. So this is a power. You can see the exhaust system under there. So this makes it a power set. Both vehicles have engines on. There's the power trailer and a power. And then you'll have a 3-car set, which is power trailer power. Now, this vehicle has got the brake section. This one hasn't. So this is a DMBS, a driving motor brake standard. And this is a DTSL, DMSL, driving motor standard toilet lavatory. So, and of course, this one has the destination blind. So you can take, here's another interesting one, again, a Plymouth one. This is a 101, 101, 108 set. So the idea was that between P870 and P828, I could take a 3-car 108, take one vehicle out and swap it with the other one, with a 101, and take the other 101 vehicle and put it with a 108, and I end up with a 3-car set that is a hybrid set and another hybrid set. So, but again, having a unit like this under overhead wires looks odd. So I needed something that would work. So I did a bit of research, and I went on Flickr and other places, and I found this unit. So there we go, this picture here. So this is an unnumbered one. It used to be a South Wales vehicle, this one. And Neville Hill, they didn't really have formal numbers for them, set numbers. So they just shove things together. And there's something interesting to notice here as well. If you compare most units, you'll find that the height of the grey matches throughout the train. But on this one, they painted, because obviously it's a 2-car set. So maybe this was painted earlier, I don't know. But at some point, the door's been damaged. So they've had to replace the door, and they replaced it with one that had the deeper grey on it. So this one's going to be tricky to model because I've got the Bachmann, I've got a Bachmann one, but I'm going to have to partially repaint it so that this band is thinner and the door is the normal height. So that'll be a bit of fun. This one also has the quartz headlight on it, which was a South Wales thing for up in the valley lines and other such places. But I'm also going to do extra work on it, such as, the speedometer and all the pipe work on the end. I use KD coupling, so they'll be on, but horns and, the steps and other little details. But I'm going to put passengers and lights in them and, all these sorts of things. This will have to be applicable to it, so I'll make a new electric circuit board for it. Also, on some 101s, the roof is flat. On others, it's not. So this one has had the ventilators plated. So it's going to be an interesting one to model. This is the other end. That's a bit of it. So that's one unit, and this is the other one. And, so there's the Class 101, Class 108 vehicle and a 101. So I get two hybrids, exactly the same as I had, for the Southwest stuff, but I'm able to justify it for the Northeast stuff. So when I run my layout as a, sort of Leeds, Doncaster kind of area with Class 307 in West Yorkshire PTE, and I can run it with this. I can run it with 114s. At one point, maybe there'll be a 141, 142, as well as Class 91s and Mark IV sets and HSTs. So, and a Transpennine Class 47, train, haul breaker Mark 1s, Mark II, sorry. So this is an example of the kind of work that you can do. And if I show you this, these are the 108 vehicles I've got at the moment, 101 and 108. So there's my 101 set, a 108, a 108, a 3-car 108, and a 2-car 108. So the idea is you take this vehicle, swap it with that vehicle, you take that vehicle, put it there. I've got that 3-car set, I've got that 2-car set, and there we go. These two here are Northwest ones, so long sight based Class 101s. One's got the destination blind type end, one's got the box head code type. And then this one's a box head code one with which is one of the South Wales based set. It's S942, which you might have had going on the northeast southwest route from Cardiff to Crewe. So you might have seen it at the buffer stops at the south of Crewe. So that's the idea with this. And so we can see there's S942, the one I mentioned just a moment ago, and then these two are North Wales ones. Now, There's something that I haven't pointed out, just noticed it, and I just remembered to give me a second, I'll just get a drink. Okay, so one of the interesting things you may not have noticed yet is this center vehicle. This is a very unusual vehicle, and I've converted it because, as I mentioned before, you've got DMBS, driving, motor, brake, standard, and driving, motor, composite, toilet. Composite means it's got first class, although in this case the first class was deleted. You know, it was just the seats were exactly the same, and you know they were 2x1 instead of 2x2. But they declassified it, so they basically painted out the yellow stripe and made it a standard class. So, but this one here is a trailer brake standard toilet. And if I show you, wrong page, if I show you what one of those is, if I show you what one of those is, get some details. Yeah, there we go. So trailer brake standard toilet is one of these. It's got a brake in the center car. Now, a normal center car, the one the Bachmann produces, is just a standard toilet. So let me show you. Maybe there we go. Okay, so it's a standard vehicle. Well, what I did was I got a spare second, center car because one of the one of these units, I think it was that this one and this vehicle, they were 3-car sets. So I had a spare trailer, and I bought a second spare trailer off someone else, and then I bought a spare body shell. And what I did was I effectively took this, and this is the vehicle I've converted. Look, you can see there. So what I've done is I've sliced this in half and sliced one of these vehicles in half. And so I chopped off this part. I removed that part on the normal vehicle, which looks basically like this. So I removed that part, cut off one of those and spliced it on, and then used some filler and sander and, fix it up to look right. Didn't even have to repaint it. And you can see I haven't even renumbered it yet. So, it was a pretty simple conversion to do. And the reason why these existed was because in the early days, let me let's see if I can find a shot. So let's see. We're talking about up to about, I think it was maybe the very early 80s. What's this one? Is this one? No, that's a 3-car set. And I've got a photo one in here somewhere. Probably a couple, actually. Tell you what, let's just scroll through until we find it. Oh, but notice this one's got bars on. That was fairly common on the Cumbrian coast ones. So looking for a 4-car set. And there are only a handful. There we go. There we go. Perfect example. So the 4-car sets, there weren't very many of them. I think there were only about 5 or 6 or something. They were used on intermediate distances where there was enough traffic for, enough passengers for a longer train. But it wasn't really long enough to justify a local haul train. And what you've got is a driving, motor, standard toilet and a teach end, and you want the guard section to be in the middle so he can get out and watch over the entire train. So in the center, we've got the standard TSL, trailer, standard, toilet, And then this is the brake standard toilet trailer. So it's a different vehicle, unusual. So I thought, oh, it'd be nice to model one of those. So I did it just because I could, and I had this sort of had the spare vehicles. So I just converted it, and so I made this DBSL. And on the ones that I'm modeling, which I showed you the 3-car sets, this one. This has the brake. So there it is there. So effectively this is a unit with 2 brakes. There's one brake compartment where there's the other one. It's just unusual, and it's like, oh, that's just asking to be modeled. You know, doing the same as everybody else kind of bores me. So I've got a spare TSL. Don't know what I do with it yet. It's spare. And then I've got an old Lima 4-car set there. For regional railways, I've got, this one's an old Lima model. I might replace it, but unfortunately, Bachmann haven't done a driving motor, a power twin set yet. They've only done a power trailer. So I've got this one. Bachmann have done the blue-grey one. I'm tempted to buy one and repaint it into regional railways. And then I've got so this is Lima, and so is this. And the Lima model isn't so bad. You know, the motor's a bit old-fashioned, but you know. And something to bear in mind as well. When you look at the railway, excuse me about the ambulance about to go by, but when you look at the real railway, you go train spotting. How many locomotives are you going to see? You're going to see maybe 1 or 2. And even if you go to somewhere like Barnaby, yes, you know there are very few places where you'll find mostly locomotives and, you know, few units. Places like Barnaby are examples, but everywhere else, you go to Leeds, and with the exception of HSTs and Class 91s, you'll hardly see a loco all day. You might see the odd freight train going through, but they're very few and far between. So on the real railway, you will have more units than locomotives. And yet we tend to model locomotives because they're the most interesting bit. Of course they are. You know, they're the bit that make the noisy, loud bit that has a lot of charisma to it. So it's just worth considering having more units, you know, because I've seen so many layouts in the past where you end up with having 100 locos and 1 unit. And also another interesting thing is if you buy on the second-hand market, people love locomotives. So if you buy a second-hand locomotive, it may have been well used, whereas a DMU, kind of boring, isn't used as much. So you're usually able to get something that hasn't had a lot of playwear in it. So that's an example there. The chocolate and cream one, I'd like to do that. Here's a fun one. This is a Strathclyde PTE one, LO602. So Longsight Depot always kind of had the dregs off everybody else. And so so this is an ex-Strathclyde PTE one that ended up being, you know, when certain lines were electrified. If I remember correctly, it was when the oh crikey, what's it called? It's a line south west of Glasgow, and oh, it's driving me up the wall now. I can't remember the name of it. Let's have a look. I'm trying to remember the name of the place now. Paisley Canal. That's it. There we go. So when the Paisley Canal line, when that was electrified, the units, they didn't need them anymore, so they transferred them to other places. So this is one that was just transferred, and so on. So it's an interesting one to model. Again, it's a power twin. So it's an opportunity for, because I'm not doing Scotland really. So it's an opportunity to have something in Strathclyde PTE in a place that you don't really have it. So that's, that's an example of something that's a bit interesting. So now I really love Network Southeast. And I've got an eclectic taste. So I'm going to be, I'm going to be doing, I've got several Network Southeast trains, plus class 33s, which is what I'm starting with. As I build my layout, I'm going to put overhead wires on it. So maybe when I first build the layout, I'm going to do running sessions using Network Southeast stuff at first, and class 33s and so on. And then as I put wires up, then it'll transition. So, and again, it's because I have an eclectic taste of like, oh, I like that, and I like that, and I like that, and I like that. There are very few places that I'm not doing. The only places I'm not doing is south of London and Scotland. But pretty much everywhere else, I'll have something or other that could operate, and they spread around a bit. So I've got a couple of Lima 121s. This is a Lima Network Southeast 101. I have the Bachmann Network Southeast one there. This one is a fun one. This is a 104 121 set. Now you may be thinking, a 121? People think 121s, they think bubble cars. They think, the single car DMU. But there are two types of 101. 121, sorry. You've got your standard, bubble car like this. So it's got a cab at each end with a brake van in it. And they're used for either very light duty or, you'd have a 3-car unit and chuck another one on the end for the rush hour or something. So, that's how those were used. However, there's also the DTS. So there weren't very many of them. There were only, I think, 5. They're in the 5.4 series numbers instead of 5.1 or 5.3, which is usual for the type. And it doesn't have an engine under it. So it's a very unusual high density, because these are high density ones that got doors all the way down, as opposed to the 101, which has got a pet, and 108, which has got a door, at sort of a third of the way in for each vehicle. The 121 DTS was used to supplement things. So you could have a 121, a normal 121, stick one of these on to expand things, or it could be used as a spare vehicle in case another vehicle was out of use. So, it's an unusual one. There it is with a 121 with the DTS on the end. And it looks the same as, the Lima vehicle, or what's, the Lima 117, or the upcoming Bachmann version. And, you can see here's a powered vehicle and the trailer to go with it. So, like I say, very unusual vehicles. There weren't many of them around. So, yeah. And I'm doing it with a 104 vehicle. Southeast. Let's see. That's one of them, I think. And they were a mixed bag again. There it is. I'm doing 704, but this is pretty much the same thing. So it's a class 104. I really do wish someone like Bachmann would bring this out. No, Seabreeze, I didn't. I vacuumed, photo pick when it existed and Flickr and just saved pictures that I thought would be interesting for modeling. Under fair usage, because I'm talking about them, that I can use them. But when I make a video and I'm referencing something, I get permission from the photographer in order to help increase their numbers. So yeah, these were used on some of the lighter weight areas. Some of the branch lines off the Great Western Line, or they would be used on the Barking route. So yeah, that was a 3-cast. All right, a 101 in between, and then a 121, no 117 on the end. So yeah, that's a 108 vehicle. Oh no, so it's just another 104. Now the NOAA Southeast 104s, they're going to be hard to model because they used they were power vehicles, and they've got 2 brake van sections. So if someone like Bachmann did them, I hope that they would do a power trailer or something, so that this kind of formation could be done. It does make it a little bit difficult, but yeah, and you could find them with 108 vehicles as well. So yeah, it's yeah, plenty of interest in that. So yeah, so that's 263, and then I'd like to do a 101, a 104 twin set there. I've got a Lima 117 unit there, and I've also got in kit form a DC Kits 119. Now, I have an idea of what I'm thinking of doing. So, in my modeling work that I've done, so this is some of the modeling I've done. I've taken photos. So I've taken the DC kits. Now, this model came about well before Dapol brought out their 121. Sorry, Helgen brought out their 128. Sorry. So what this is a Network Southeast Bachmann 108 that I've taken the body shells off, and I've gone and stretched the chassis by chucking a piece, plastic card in it, and then embraced it all up. And then this is the Helgen underframe components when they did the blue-gray one. Originally I was going to build a new one. You can see how it's been stretched there. Originally I was going to build a complete new set by using the components off the 108. But when the Helgen model came out, it's like, okay, they've got these parts out, because it's one of those things. You get started on something and you put it aside and you don't get around to it. Annoying. So that's the idea behind it. It's, like I say, got some bracing on it. It's got some plastic card, and it's designed to stretch the chassis. Now, if I can get another cheap 108, I could do this again, stretch the chassis, because the 101s, 108s, 104s, things of that nature, they were 57-foot chassis, whereas the 115, 116, the high density units, basically 115, 116, 117, 118, those were longer based 64-foot long vehicles. The 119 is also a 64-foot vehicle, but it's like a stretched 108, basically. So if we compare backup one. Units, DMU, first generation, we've got 119. So let's find a good number. Okay, let's just put that aside there for a moment. And so there are 2 units. That'll do. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. So this is your standard 108, 57-foot long vehicle. And it's got the destination blind end. So this is the 119. And largely, it's the same. The main difference is, oops, wrong way around. The main difference is that you've got an extra window set in it. If we compare the two again, you can see it's got 1, 2, 3, and a small window. For this, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, and a small window at the other end. So, theoretically, you could take a Batman 108, to do this vehicle, you could take a couple of Batman 108 vehicles and splice in an extra part to make that body shell. However, the other end is a little more complicated because it's got a large compartment. It was used for longer distance routes, and it had a larger parcels bay, but also it had this vehicle had a buffet car in it. So it was used, like I say, for intermediate levels. So probably a photo around here somewhere of the other side where it all seemed to be the wrong side. That was a bit of one. There we go. So if you look, you can see there's a large blanked area there, and so on. So DC Kits used to do a 119 kit. I own the kit. It's all ready to go. I just need to put it together, and one of these days I will do it on my channels in stages so you can see how it's done. And it comes in 3 body side panels for each vehicle, and you get a roof and ventilators, and there's a lot of other things you have to do. But I bought a load of Hellgen spare chassis pieces in order to be able to do the work. So it's some creative modeling. There's another version of a unit which I'm not sure if I've got it on my list. I've thought about it, haven't fully decided. Oh yeah, I've got it on the list, and that's a 114. Now 114 is almost exactly the same as much easier to do. So this is a Derby heavyweight. The Class 108s are Derby lightweights. This is a Derby heavyweight. And again, it's like the 119, but it's got a standard length brake van section, a brake compartment. So this one's much easier to model. So again, I could take a 108 and use spare parts and convert it, because I've got when I had the spare body that I chopped the brake van section off, I've still got the front half of it, still got the front half of the body. So I can take a couple of these center panels and stretch Class 108 vehicles to do it. There's going to be a bit of jiggery-pokery around this area here because the windows and doors are in slightly different positions, so it means cutting and shutting several sections. But that's again, it's another part of the fun. So that's what modeling is about. So there's my 119, and then I've got a couple of parcels units. So as you already saw the model of, I've got the 128, but there was also the Class 114 DPU. So Class 108. Oops, too far. 4. And these were Class 108s, sorry, 114 units that had a roller shutter door placed in one vehicle on the power vehicle and 2 on the unpowered vehicle on the trailer. The one, excuse me, I've got to take another drink. So the what did the W mean in the numbering? W probably means Western. They used to have prefixes on vehicles. So E would be Eastern regions. So, you know, the Anglia and the East Coast Main Line kind of area and branches off it. W was the Great Western area. So, you know, might get them in Devon and Cornwall and South Wales, Mid Wales, and the, you know, sort of London-ish area. M is Midland, so what used to be LMS, and S is for Southern. They also had another prefix much later on, IC, as in intercity, but that was seen on coaches. So this type of unit, the 114s were created for flatter areas. They were used in Lincoln, at Lincoln Depot, and they did the Lincolnshire area. Well, Lincolnshire is very flat. And so the, you know, power trailers tend to be used on areas that it's fairly flat, whereas if you've got hilly places with a lot of, you know, climbs up and down, like the Northeast, you know, in the Leeds area, you get an awful lot of that. So you're more likely to get power twin units. So it depends on how hilly that part of the country is. They're generally used in certain areas, and you know, so 5 114s were converted into DPU, diesel parcels unit. This is where, you know, you got parcels work traveling around, but there's no need for a locomotive and coaches because you've only got a locomotive and 1 or 2 coaches. Well, locomotives weigh a lot, they use a lot of fuel, whereas one of these uses hardly any by comparison. So this is a much more economical use of the vehicle. And there were a number of DPUs. There were 105s, 101s, 117s. Sorry, not 117s. There was a the 127s. They had it as well. 127s used to be the former Bedpan, Bedford to St Pancras units for all the stopping services. So you'd have local trains and intercity 125s on the express stuff, and then they would do the stopping train, stopping all the stations. However, they electrified the line and then later put Thameslink on, so 317s and then later 319s replaced them. And the 317s were cascaded over to the East Coast Main Line and then later to Anglia again. So the 127s were disposed of, but some of them were shortened to 2-car units and had roller shutter doors and the windows plated up and turned into parcels units. But this is an example. Now, the Lima 117 could be used underneath, but I decided that I would use another 121, a class 108 chassis and stretch it. And the reason was because if I've got, when you have 2 different types of engine, often they'll have different gearbox ratios. So you take a Bachmann 37 and you take a Hornby Class 50. The Hornby Class 50 has a high-speed gear ratio on it. So it will run away and it will drag the 37 that's coupled behind it. And, you know, if it's going the other way, the 50 will shove it. And of course, you can damage your wheel sets that way because effectively one's being pushed too fast and it's moving. You know, you're going to be scraping the wheels on the track. but also dragging the gears. The plastic gears can be, can be trashed from it. So rather than have to buy an expensive decoder, I could use just a normal cheap decoder and put it in one of these vehicles. And because both the chassis were the same type from the same brand batch, those were the Network Southeast ones. I could take both units would have the same gear ratio, and they just need stretching and the modifications doing, and the body shells the DC kits one. So I'm able to do both and put them together because they frequently. There's a 101 that. So if I find this is a pair of 114s, that's a 114 holding a BG. There's a 128, so they ran together. Amusingly, the 121s, they took the engines off them because they'd been given better engines, and they were the same engines used under class 142s. Interesting fact for you. So, yeah, it's something a little bit different and bright and cheerful. It's one of the things I love about the sectorization era for me. It's not just blue and blue-gray. There's a lot of color in there. And I have a particular fascination for parcels trains, so these hit the spot quite nicely. So, yeah. So then I'm going to go down to the second generation DMUs, and I've got some of Hornby's class 142s. They're not very good, to be honest. The motor is awful. The pickups are not terribly fantastic because they pick up on the top of the wheels, and of course, when you get muck on, when you get muck on your track, the reason why you got muck on the, when you got muck on the track, the muck gets stuck to the wheel as well, and so ironically, it's a bit like leaves on the line. The whole leaves on the line problem from years ago was that old-fashioned trains use brake blocks that scrape the wheel surface. They squeeze on the tread, on the flange, not on the flange. They on the surface of the wheel that touches the rail. Whereas when they upgraded to things like 156, and especially 158s were some of the worst ones for it. So when they moved to the 158s, those used disc brakes, and so when it came down to the leaf fall season, what would happen is that when leaves land on the line and they get run over by a train wheel, it squashes it, and all the the slick mush comes out and it sticks to the wheel surface. And so what was happening is that there's a low powered voltage going through the track, and so for the signalman in the signal box, you got the transponders that receive this voltage, and it feeds it up to the signaling system to tell where the train is. It's not like a GPS. This is way before GPS was around. So in order to tell where it was, it would use that low voltage to feed back where the train was, and so on his display, it would show where the train was and how it was moving. Well, when the leaf fall season happened, it was getting stuck to the wheels and it was given intermittent contact. So effectively, the signalman was there watching a train approach, and then it would just vanish from his panel, which was a disaster. The accidents happen when things like this because he doesn't know where the trains are. And when you've got a train in each block, one after the other, and one's disappeared, that can be a nightmare. So you have to extend it, and then you've got delays and other issues going on. And in this, and the way railways work today, we got so many trains, one right after the other, and if there's a problem with one, it messes up the entire system all day. You have this same problem flowing through. So, this is So for the same reasons with the 142, where you've got the you've got the pickups on the top of the wheel, what happens is you have dirt on your track, just the normal dust in the air and so on, or just dirt off of maybe rubber traction tires used to be a big problem, less of a problem today. But when you've got dirt, your track gets dirty, your train stops working because it's not really able to pick up the electricity between the wheel and the rail. And cleaning it fixes that problem. But if you don't clean so you've got to clean your wheels as well. But the problem is that when the contact is on the top, it picks up the dirt and it gets stuck between the contact on the top. So if I just turn my camera off for a second. So if you imagine your wheel and you've got the contact, your electrical pickup on the top, when you've got the muck attached to the wheel, it gets clogged under the contact. And so it's not picking up the electricity anymore. And then you've got to take it apart and take the wheel out and clean that up and clean the contact and then stick it all back together again. It's a nuisance. So if you, when you have models, you really want to have, if you imagine the cross section of the wheel, you want to have the contact on the side, not on top, because the top is where the dirt goes. The side doesn't. So it's just a case of clean your wheels, and you don't have to worry about the contacts. So that's a simple idea of one of the issues that you can get, and that's why the Hornby model wasn't terribly good. And it's also quite dated for its time. Now I know that DC kits or real track models are producing a version of it. So now I'd like to do some Ridge Railways ones for the Northeast period, but I never got around to buying them. Unfortunately, when Realtrek did it, they did the refurbished version, which has higher back seats and in modern liveries. And he says he's going to do the older liveries, and hopefully he will. It took a while to sell them, and he's moved on to the 156. He's going to be doing the 142. Maybe he'll do the 144 and 143s. But I much regret not having picked one up, or at least a couple. And I'm going to need 144s. I need a pair of them, but I'm going to do. Sorry. Well, it's 3. So I need 2 West Yorkshire PTE ones, and one of them I need to have a centre car version because they come in 2 and 3 car sets. If I show you, second gen 144 and Yorkshire PTE, so they come in 2 car sets and in 3 car sets. There was an amusing thing because the 142s were built as 2 car sets originally. 144s were built as 2 car sets originally, and then the centre car was added later on. And when they first introduced them, the 2 car sets looked, had dirty chassis, but in fact this is pretty fresh there. If you look, you can see how this one is kind of brown and greenish kind of color, and this one's pretty clean. So they kind of stuck out a little bit. I wonder if there's another version here somewhere. But yeah, and the thing I like about them is they're bright and cheerful. Again, that's one of the reasons why I like West Yorkshire PTE area. They were unusual for being bright, very bold color scheme. So so that's that. Yeah. I've got a couple. I've actually got 3, but I've taken one apart to convert, but now I'm probably going to put it back together again. I was going to use the mechanism in an EMU. I'll mention that after. So so at the moment I've got a 2 car set, a 2 car 108 set, sorry, 150. It's in Ridge Railways livery, but I'm going to do in the Network Northwest livery. It's one that hasn't been released so far. So Network Northwest, if you haven't seen it already, it was a version of provincial livery. So it uses the same livery as provincial, but it's got this red and grey marker stripe instead. Now, something that's worth pointing out while I think about liveries. So I'm a bit of an expert in liveries. I've actually done contract work for Beckman and and Apple. But actually, I'm going to go back slightly. So when the before Region Railways, there was provincial, and they effectively rebranded themselves. So their first livery, they did the 142s in a version of this livery, where it's blue with a bold, with a white and dark blue stripe, aircraft blue. And but one of the problems is that once you chuck it through the carriage washer and the sun beating on it, this light blue, it kind of fades and looks quite grubby. I'll probably have a photo around here somewhere. There you go. It gets really pasty and washed out. So they decided to go for a different version of it when they did the 1502s, and this is it. So it's similar to ScotRail livery in a way, but it's got aircraft blue around the windows, white stripe, pale blue stripe, cornflower blue, and then tan under here. The blue was the disabled area. So it uses tan. Now, when Region Railways came along, they rebranded themselves. What they did was they used rail grey instead. So when you see blue grey coaches, it's the same grey that you get around the windows. It's the same grey you get on the bottom of rail freight liveried, the subsector 1 with the logos on the side, Transrail, similar colour. So it's the same grey. And so they, same colours down except for the pale grey, top and bottom, and then this linking stripe, set of stripes on the end of each vehicle. And like I say, it was a rebranding. They also went with Region Railways branding like that. So it was a rebranding exercise. So Network Northwest is the original provincial livery with the tan, not the grey, and then this sort of red, it's rail red actually, and which is an orangey shade. Same colour as Intercity 125 stripes, and then a dark grey in the middle. So I've got a 150 Ridge Railways one. I'm just going to repaint it, and I've got the transfers already, so that's easy. And then I've got a GMPTE 150, which let's go back to my models. So this is one I painted quite some time ago now. What date is it? 2010. So about a year after Beckman came out with the model, and it's a 150 one and a 152 center car, and that was prototypical. I'll show you in oops, another ambulance going by, and someone with an idiot racer car. So there's going to be a 3-car set around here somewhere. That was one. We'll get a better shot. Yeah, there we go. So this is a 151 vehicle at each end with a 152 in the middle. There we go. There's a 3-car set. Now, got that one as well. So at some point, I'm going to do one in Centro livery as well, and that's where the other vehicle comes from. So if you imagine that and that, are two different units. That's the center car for, that's the 2-car set for the other one. So now the bottom half, I'm doing much better. I have 3 156s. One of them, I've got a spare vehicle for doing a 3-car set, which worked on the Settle & Carlisle line in about 1989, 1990. Let's take another drink. So the 156 3-car set there, but I'm also doing this here. Now 158602. Now, if you know anything about 156s, they're all 158. Sorry, 158. Try again. 158702. If you know anything about 158s, they're all 7s and 8s and maybe even 9s. However, earlier on, I was mentioning how they had a bit of a problem with the leaf fall season. And so to combat it, they did weird hybrid sets for a while. It was the winter of 91, 92. And they basically coupled 156 and 158 together on certain routes where there was a problem. And the 156 was able to, signal the track circuits, whereas the 158s were having problems. And they took they made 4 units and just jumbled them around in order to do it. And the paper number here is 158602 or whatever. So there are a few of them. And I happened to buy a spare 158 vehicle and a Lima 156 vehicle, and it's like, yeah, I can put them together to make that. I don't know why that one's there. Although it does actually relate to something I'm going to mention in a moment. So 158s, let's find a 158 vehicle. So, wrong way again. So on 158s, the skirting, it's kind of flat and square on the front with a bit of a lip in the bottom. But one of the problems with 158s is that they're high-speed units. They're 100 miles an hour. Is it 100 or 90? I can't remember now. I think it might be 90, actually. Let's have a look in the book. A second. Best book to look in, actually. Unfortunately, peeps, I'm old, and so I've got to wear my glasses now for reading. So, 90 miles per hour. So 158s are 90 mile an hour units. But when you have 2 units going through tunnels, the flat end pushes the air, and it wasn't so good. So they tinkered around an idea of having a sort of tapered corner on it. And so if you look at this picture here, you can see there's the tapered corner. So it's a little bit different. I've got some photos of my 158 section. 763 is what I'm going to do like it. So I don't know whether it shows it very well, but it's kind of pointy here. It goes out and in. It's like a pointy edge to it, and then it tapers off on the corners. And it was trialed, but it really didn't make any difference. Really, it was this bit here that was the flat bit, and unless they were going to rebuild the front end, that wasn't going to be useful. So, it didn't really pan out in the end. But I thought it was interesting enough to model one, so that's a part of my modeling list. So I've got a 158, 156 hybrid. I've got one standard set. I've got the one with the tapered ends there. Then I got 158 805. Now, Let's get rid of that. So normally, of course, you got them like that, but some of them, and in Scotland, and I'm really kind of disappointed that Bachmann haven't actually done this yet. They've announced that they're going to do a new version of the 158. I hope that they modify the end with different types of skirting on. Because what happened was it was a particular problem in Scotland. 158 714 was the first one fitted with them, and effectively they needed snow plows for the lower section to just push aside any banks of snow that might be in the way. So they fitted them to all the ScotRail ones. But of course, if you've seen a ScotRail liveried 158 from Bachmann, they're all the flat original ends. They haven't done that modification. So I intend to do a 3D model of it because I've already got several 158s, and this is one that I want to have the skirting on. So it was an unusual one. 803 was also interesting because it had flat at one end and skirting on the other end. Snow plowed end on the other end. So, like I say, just another bit of interest for the units that just wanted something a bit different. Now, if I'm modeling this one, if I'm modeling like the Midlands area, so Birmingham, Peterborough, that kind of thing, well, that's what that's what would work on the Birmingham to Norwich, or Liverpool to Norwich, which goes down, comes down the West Coast Main Line it goes across to Manchester, then wiggles its way down through Sheffield and down to Derby, Nottingham, and then across to Peterborough, and then goes across to Norwich. So it's an interesting wiggly line. And then 158902, that's one of the sorry, I did forget to mention that 158s originally. Actually, I'll go back a bit. So originally, 158s looked like this, and they had the express branding because these were provincial express units. So they got the dark grey around the windows. So this is provincial express, and they removed this. They I don't know why, but they maybe didn't think it was appropriate anymore. And so if you notice, this has not got it there. So I've got one that's like this. That's basically that. And then 158902, I want, it's a West Yorkshire PT one. There were 10 of them, 901 to 910. They were used on things like Leeds and York and Leeds to Preston and Blackpool. So they would travel across that way. They would also come down to Manchester sometimes, but they tend to do the Hebden Bridge route across the Pennines. So, and again, it goes well with the 144s and so on. Now, there's another unit that I haven't mentioned so far, or a couple of units. So I've got a couple of 153s. One is a Newton Heath based one, so if I'm modeling the Manchester area, and this one is a Tyseley one, which I saw at Doncaster on a Doncaster to Birmingham service. But also you get them in the Birmingham. It operate in the Birmingham area as well, so it has a wider range. But here's an interesting one. Now, many years ago, Dapol did a model of it, but the Dapol model is a bit kind of clumsy by today. Let's have a look on it. So. So there's an example of it. It's a bit sort of square and chunky, and I mean, someone's tried to do a 153 conversion here, but you can see the shape of it is a bit sort of square and not terribly appealing. If we compare if we compare a 153, that's not the best end. That's the new end. There we go. If we compare that, the finesse of this model is remarkably better than this one. See if there's a good photo. When you look at that, and you look at that, or that, there you go. It was a nice model of its time, but it's chunky and square, and the finesse of it is not as good. So and if we look at the 155 by the Hornby 153 by comparison, it seems to have the wrong end. There we go. So you look at that by comparison to where was that real photo? You compare that; it looks much more realistic. So, as regards to my model list, I've gone and bought two 153s, and I'm going to convert it into a 155. And this will be a West Yorkshire liveried 155. So it'll look like this. Bright again, bright and cheerful. There's an amusing thing about the 155s. They had a bit of a problem with them. They had problems with the door mechanism, and it kept popping open in transit. So they had to replace the door mechanism, and so as a result, they didn't bother repainting it. So it has the blank bit on it. But I really like this color scheme, and the 155 is one of those few units that hasn't changed at all. The buttons are the same, the interior is the same. They've just facelifted it with some new seat covers and stuck a new paint job on it. But in general, it has always been the same thing. Now, 155s are interesting units in themselves. Originally, there were 35 that ran out of Cardiff for southwest intermediate journeys. So they would do things like the Cardiff to Portsmouth trains via Bristol and Salisbury. And they would do things going down from sort of Cardiff and Bristol down to Exeter and down to Plymouth. And they would do a few bits down in Cornwall, but not so much down that way. So they would travel, here Westbury, interestingly under overhead wires. Maybe that's going for conversion. So Hereford, I think that's Hereford. Bath, Southampton. So they would travel around the southwest parts of the country. Well, by the late 80s, things like the 121s, the single car units, they needed yes, I agree, part-time spotter. I've got several of them, and they're very, very nice. The underframe is a little boxy. It's a box with metal bit, with a big heavy metal weight in it. I'm going to modify mine and make it much better. But 3D modeling parts, or you go and spend a lot of money and buy the new Real Track Models one, which is very, very nice, but it's also it's 200 quid or whatever, and I already own them. So anyway. So the 155s. So what happened was by the late 80s, 88, 89, 90, and they were only built in 1988. These things. So by the while they were building the eights. They provincial decide, sorry, regional railways, I think by then, they decided that things like the 121s and 122 bubble car units, they were, they were just outdated from the 1950s and 60s, late 50s into the 60s. So they needed to be replaced. And what are we going to replace them with? Well, we could build some new single car units, and they would serve two functions. They could work the branch lines where nothing really goes, where there's just a service during the day, an hourly service or something. Let's shift to 153s. So they would run branch line services, here and there. But they would also supplement other trains during the rush hour. So there's not enough need for two car units, but there's enough for three. So they could be added to the end. So what they did was they took the 155s and they chopped them in half. They split them and they built a new cab in them. So this is the original cab. You can see how the lights are lower. And there's the new cab. Let's see if I can find a better shot. So there's the new cab. Now, unfortunately, they made a bit of an error. If I show you the detail photos, it's quite apparent. So this is the original end. And you can see between the door and the front of the unit, there's a lot of space. The driver sits here, and there's the desk here, and there's a bit of a crash damage, a crumple zone here. But, there's a lot of distance. Whereas when you look at the other end, there's not much distance at all. And so what happened was it was the Heaton got the first units. And if you can imagine, there's the driver's seat, and there's the driver's knees are literally up to the end, right under the dash, and it was very uncomfortable and not satisfactory. So the unions blacked them. They refused to use them because they said they were dangerous and there wasn't enough room. And it was having a uncomfortable driver, he's thinking about the comfort of the driving experience rather than paying attention to the signals and where he needs to stop and things like that. So they rightfully had complaints. And so what they did was they redesigned them slightly, and they moved the bulkhead in. So if you imagine looking vertically down, if we imagine that this is the cab area, and this is your vestibule area, what they did was they brought the bulkhead. You can see it showing through. They brought the bulkhead out at 90 degrees, and then went down with the door in the middle, and then 45 degrees, and then 45 degrees. So they've got the it comes out like that, goes across, and then back out on the other side. Problem is, when they did the conversions, they put a new toilet section and a bicycle area, but the bicycle area has got to get through the skinny door area. And there's only 2 feet. You can see you can just about see the red of the handrail showing through there. And then you've got this here. So between that and that, there's 2 feet. Can you imagine getting a mountain bike through 2 feet? It's a real challenge. Believe me, I've had to do it myself. So, personally, I think that the train operating companies have stuffed up, because I think when they've refurbished them, they should have put the bike area there. On one side and the disabled area on the other side or something, because it's just awkward for everybody. Then you can just have luggage rack here and a toilet there. But, it's a pain. But like I say, the other thing that they did with the 155 was they moved the exhaust. So excuse me, I've got hiccups slightly. So the way the exhaust would work on a 155 is the exhaust comes down here, it goes over the top of the bogie, would pop back down under here and go up the end. I can show you because I took some photos last year on a research project. you can see it comes up there and goes up the inside. So see if I've got from the outside. There you go. So this is the kind of work that I'll be adding to the 153. So the work required so what I'll be doing is taking the 153, I'll be filling up the window and removing the lights, and this part here isn't really changed. And then I'll be reprofiling, making a new exhaust from it, and backdating it. I'll be taking something that was converted and putting it back, putting it, retrofitting it back into a 155. Two units together, and it's only the inside vehicle, so I'm going to fill in the windows and modify it there. But yeah, so that's an interesting project, and again, I'll be doing that on my channel. And then I've got a 159. So the 159s were built for the Waterloo to Exeter route via Salisbury, and they're Network Southeast 158s basically. What makes it a 159 is that it had a first class compartment, and it's a long first class compartment. They were originally built as 158s, and the numbers were they didn't have numbers painted on the front, but they ran under tops as 158 863, because 862 was the last one done. So they ran, so 001 was 863, 002 was 864, and so on. And they ran, under testing, and then they went up to Rosyth dockyards for modification with first class compartments, and came out, as full 158s. There we go. That's one without the numbers on, because it was still classed as 158 at that point. So it was just under testing to check it on the route and driver training and things like that. So yeah, I know I love Network Southeast, so having one. I mean, it doesn't really fit where I'm modeling, because again, I don't model the southern region, and I'm not modeling the southwest anymore. So I'm just going to have it as I'll probably do it as one without numbers, and have it on. It's being taken from Derby down to the southwest, or maybe going up to Rosyth, as as built. Now, the next units on my list are 165s, 166s, and I'm fortunate to have 6 units so far, and I picked them up at sort of 50 to 75 pounds ish. Now, there's 2 versions of 165s. Let's just stick with Network Southeast. So there are the 165 O's and the 165 1s. So 165s, they operate in 2 general areas. They operate the Marylebone line up to Aylesbury. That's the primary route, and they have some other lines outside of that as well. That's what they were built for, and they were part of the total route modernisation. So the Marylebone line was the last one of the southern region, of the London stations. To they were still using 1960s stuff and steam era signalling, so semaphores in large parts of it. And so they modified, they did new track work, new signals, new trains. The whole route was modernized. So, another drink. Excuse me. I'm going to pour myself another one. Hope that's not making you thirsty. So, this one's unfortunate. It looks like it's hit something. So, One of the modifications that's needed on the 165Os is they need to have this bar thing here. And this is a tripcock because on the Marylebone line, in the close to London area, they share the same tracks with London Underground, and the London Underground trains have got a tripcock system so that to stop trains entering another block or whatever. So it's an old-fashioned mechanism, and it's literally a bar, and if it goes over it and it's not supposed to go there, it will apply the brakes, if I remember correctly. The other thing that's different about them is that they don't have any yaw dampers here. They've got the brackets for them, but they don't have the yaw dampers fitted. The 165Os are limited to 75 miles an hour. The 165-1s are 90 mile an hour units. So if we jump to the 165-1s, and also it's worth mentioning that there are 2-car sets and 3-car sets. So when we look at the when we look at the ones, let's find a shot of the side. There we go. You can see the yaw damper there. So there's the variation in them. Now, I'm going to open up so let me just grab that up there. Okay. 2-car sets. Let's find a good side shot. How's that? Yeah, that's not too bad. And I need a good side shot. This one, preferably with the first class. Perfect. Okay. So there are two variations in 165s. So if we look, we've got a driving cab, we've got large, small, large window. Then you've got 5 large windows, 2 large windows, 2 small windows. And then likewise, 2 small windows. You can notice this one hasn't got the bar across, that's the toilet. 2 windows, exactly the same as that. 5 windows, the same as that. But for the first class section, there's just 2 windows with a blank space in between. And all they've gone and done is on one vehicle, on this vehicle, they've got a window between, like that. The other thing to notice on 165s is that they only have basic ventilators and hopper windows. So that's their ventilation. And that 166s, which is what Batman do, they are they've got air conditioning, but I'll explain that in a minute. I'm just showing the variation just so you can see it in advance, something to watch out for. Now, so with the 2-car sets, they've got a first class section at one end. But for the 3-car sets, they've got a larger, so this half of the train is perfectly fine. But this one, they've got a larger first class section that goes beyond the middle. If we look again, you can see it goes up to the door. Whereas this one, it goes beyond the door and has an extra compartment and a half. So it's got 1, 2, 3 standard windows, 1 small window, which is the same as one of these, and then a large window after a blanking patch, and then the standard in there. So this is a variation. Now, when it comes to the 166, these are a bit different. Let's go now southeast again, the original colour scheme. So let's find a good side shot. How's that? A little bit small. How big is it? I'll be right. Okay, so 166s, they have first class section at both ends. So this vehicle and that vehicle are identical. The centre car, 2 small windows, 2 large windows, 5 large windows, 2 large windows, 2 small windows, one of them being a toilet. And there's a toilet in one of these as well. So These vehicles were identical, but if you notice, this one has got a solid window. That's because these are air conditioned and you don't want to open the windows on them. You don't want to have hopper windows all the way through. The only reason why they've got hopper windows is because if the air conditioning system fails, you're going to get horrible heat in there, especially in the summer. And so the conductor, the guard, can use his key to unlock the hopper windows. Normally they're kept locked out of use, but he can unlock them so they can be opened in the event the air conditioning system fails. So the primary distance between them, and I did a bit of research some years ago. So if we look, you can see they've got the same yaw damper system. And actually, I'm going to grab the 165 as well while I think about it. Let's go with the 3-car set. And what I did was I went to Ealing Broadway. You can see Ealing Broadway there, and I just sat and took a photo of one going through, so I got all the details. So you can see, as before, 2 large windows, small window, and when we look at the 166, you can see the arrangement is similar. But on the roof, you can see it's got like a notch in it with a mushroom pod in it. That's a part of the air conditioning system. You compare it to the 165, it's just a ventilator. So that's a big difference between them. In the center section, you can see, let me just drag this over. So this is the 165. And if we look, we've got the radiator and the engine, and then you've got this triangle piece here. But if you put this one on it, there's the radiator and the engine, and then this is the air conditioning radiator. So it's a modification design. You can see there, it's a bit smaller, but you can see the comparison to them. So, yeah. Also, they've got these vents above the windows, which the 165s haven't got. So, like I say, little modifications there. Something that was added later, this mechanism here, this is a sander, but they didn't have them originally. And this is the other side. So I'm taking the 166 and I'm converting them into 165s. And a part of the work would be making new window frame etches. So, you just stick them on the top of the hopper windows, because on the Bachmann model, it's paint. The hopper windows on the 166, so they're literally just paint. So what is required to do is to fill the holes in to remove the pod, fill up this hole, fill up that, and then on the underframe, you remove that and put in the triangle piece. But I'm going to be going a little bit different, because if we look, I'm going to go to the web again. So the Hornby 156 was basically the Lima model, and it's basically a box with some raised details on, and a big metal weight goes in it, and it's got a ring-filled motor here. Well, this looks awful, really. And there's a company which was not A1. What are they called? I've forgotten the name of them now. Hurst models, and he did some white metal components that you could carve off all the original box and then stick the white metal bits under it. I'm going to do the same thing, but with 3D printed components. Excuse me about the ambulance going by. So you can take the old Lima model and modernize it and turn it into something much more realistic. So now when when Batman came around with the 166 and 165, they were much better. Instead of being a flat box, they had a kind of triangular bit, and they've got like a lump in the middle which sticks down because the motor is in this section here. You can just about see it above the window frame. So when Batman did the model, the motor sort of hangs down a bit below, and so if we imagine, I'm going to use this here. So if you imagine a cross section here with the front pointing towards us, effectively it had two triangle pieces of plastic, and then in the center there was a box that hung down, which was where the motor was above it, and then you'd have another triangle of plastic there. So these pieces here are pieces that slot in, and the chassis between the 158 and the 165, the 166, are the same. The only difference is the bogie and the plastic pieces there, but they just swap them over. They got some screws on the sides that can remove them. So it's not much different. Now, the next generation was the 150, and of course, as we know, if you own one, they've got all the separate boxes and things underneath. So what my goal is to take the 165, sorry, the 166, and make a chassis like this, where it's all separate components, you know, with making some compromises for the box that hangs around with the motor in it, and you know, modernizing it to basically take a, you know, the 156 was an 80s model with 80s specification. The 158 was a 90s model with a, you know, 90 specification. So it was, you know, the first models with central motor, flywheels, drive shafts running, you know, driving all the wheels. But you know, it still had a fairly somewhat limited chassis. Much better by comparison, but it was like it was like half relief, I think you would say. Whereas now you got full relief chassis. So I'm going to do somewhere between the two. You know, half relief, so it'll have some parts that are all the way through. Other parts, because of the box that hangs around on the motor section, is going to have to be a compromise. So that's what I'm doing with that. Let's do this back up again, and the model list. So, and then finally, I've got a 207. This is DC Kit's model, the 3-car set. I've got a friend of mine. He has a class 25 that he wants turning into one of the Ethel vehicles. And if you're not familiar with an Ethel, these are loco diesel 97. So an Ethel. And an Ethel is electric train heating X locomotive. So they're class 25s. And what happened was that back in the 80s, they used to have steam heat in Scotland and a few other places. But they were stopping, they were, you know, it was expensive to run and you could only use them in certain places. So they were taking the steam heat coaches out of service and using air condition and using electric train heating vehicles. And they basically decided that they weren't going to provide steam heat coaches anymore. So if they were running steam specials, then how do you heat up the coaches? Or trains that had, you know, class 37Os up in Scotland, how do you heat the coaches in the winter? So what they did was they came up with the Ethels, and the idea is that the engine would generate electricity for the electric train heating equipment, but the traction motors were isolated or removed, and you know, they were just used for that. Now, a friend of mine bought one to turn into an Ethel. I'm painting it for him. And I said, hey, can I modify the chassis to remove the mechanism? Because you don't need the motor. You're going to be hauling it with a steam engine. So, so basically I'm getting the mechanism out of it and making a new box with some coach wheel type things. And so I'm going to have a spare mechanism. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the motor, flywheel, lose the other drive shaft, and then, power one bogie on the 207. So that's, and if you don't know what a 207 looks like, just in case, DEMU 207, and this is the one I'm doing. So it's a DEMU, a diesel electric multiple unit. So it's basically a diesel engine powering electric motors, as opposed to a normal DMU, which is which uses a gearbox. So Voyagers are in this classification. They are DEMUs. They're diesel electric multiple units. They have diesel engines that provide power, which electrical power, which power the electrical motors. And electric motors have a lot more torque, which means they've got better acceleration. So I have a DC kit's one of these, and I'm going to do it up, using, and you can see how much space there is there. So I can have the engine, I can have the motor driving the gearbox tower with the class 25 chassis to do it, and the distance between the axles is almost identical. So, and 207s are somewhat interesting because there are two versions of the DMUs that were left towards the end of British Rail. There were 205s, which have the earlier ends, so they were very flat. So flat at the front, flat with a slightly tapering angle on the edge, but the corners were very hard, simple. Basically, they were Mark 1 coaches. That's basically what they were. Whereas the 207s, they were built with, sort of more like the some of the EMUs. They have a similar design. They were smoothed out versions, so the corners were less harsh, and they were just a little bit more, a bit nicer, not just flat with a rim over the edge. They weren't coach ends, they were smoothed off versions, So they were a little bit nicer. So just interesting units. The other thing that's unusual about them is they're slim, they're skinny. The width on them they're thinner than normal DMUs, and the reason is because the Hastings line has limited distances. They have a limited clearance. The tunnels are quite small, and of course, when they were building old steam trains, when they built the line, that didn't really matter. But then they had a standard gauge and a standard width and a standard height, and these were a little bit too, normal gauge was too big to go through those tunnels side by side, and so they had to build units that were slimmer to do it, and that's the reason why you got the class 33-2s as well. So you got 33 O's, which are the standard type, 33 1s, which have got the pipes on the end for multiple working, and the with EMU stock. And then you got the 1502s, which are the slim version, which we built for the Hastings line, so they could have freight trains on them and engineer trains. So, this was the DMU equivalent. So I think I'm going to finish now. I've rambled on for, a couple of hours now. And hopefully you'll find that interesting. It gives you an idea of some of the things I want to do, and what some of the trains are like, and you compare the real thing to the model. And for me, the goal is, how can you take something that's real and represent it in model form? How can you upgrade something that you can get in model form and turn it into something that's a masterpiece of your own? So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. You know, I've got some thank you for the people who've commented in the side. Hopefully, if you watch this later, you can comment underneath. Tell me what you think, if you appreciate the kind of thing I'm explaining.